Most people believe that peace of mind only comes when life finally settles down, when all problems disappear, and when the noise of the world fades into silence. We convince ourselves that serenity is a distant prize, waiting for us on the other side of solved finances, perfect health, flawless relationships, and endless stability. But the truth is much harsher. Life never truly settles. Today you may solve one problem, and tomorrow 3 new ones take its place. If you wait for perfect conditions to grant you calm, you will wait forever. Peace cannot be postponed to a future that never arrives. It must be claimed here, now. Exactly as life is. Others will tell you that anxiety is weakness. That worry is proof you are fragile. That fear means you are broken in some way. But this is another lie that keeps us trapped. Anxiety, at its core, is not a flaw. It is a signal. It is the whisper of your inner self calling you to pay attention, reminding you that your mind has strayed too far into illusions about what might happen, instead of resting in what already is. Far from being your enemy, worry is an invitation to look inward and take responsibility for your perception. It is not here to destroy you, it is here to guide you. And then there are those who think peace is reserved for the sages, the monks on mountaintops, the philosophers in marble halls, the men who abandon society in pursuit of silence. This belief is comforting because it excuses us from trying. We say, of course I can't be peaceful, I live in the modern world. I have bills, deadlines, relationships, responsibilities. But the Stoics dismantled this excuse long ago. They proved that peace is not about the absence of difficulty, but about the presence of discipline. You don't need to escape society to find calm. You don't need a monastery. You don't need a mountain. You only need to master yourself. This is the paradox of peace in our age of constant motion. We are surrounded by technology designed to demand our attention. Every ding, every notification, every breaking headline is another attempt to drag our minds away from stillness. We scroll for a comfort and find only comparison. We chase validation online and discover emptiness in return. The faster the world becomes, the louder the anxiety hums beneath it. And yet, the very same ancient wisdom that helped Marcus Aurelius govern an empire while remaining steady, that helped Epictetus survive slavery with dignity, that helped Seneca counsel the powerful while keeping his soul intact, that wisdom still speaks to us today. Peace of mind is not passive. It is not the product of fortune or luck. It is a skill, a form of training, something anyone can learn. The Stoics called us not to retreat from life, but to engage with it more honestly. Their philosophy was not about building walls against reality, but about meeting reality without illusion. Imagine the strength it takes to walk into every day, not waiting for calm to arrive, but carrying calm with you like armor. This is what Stoicism offers, a way to remain grounded even when the ground shakes. In this journey, we will explore 10 Stoic lessons, not as abstract theories for scholars, but as practical tools for ordinary people, tools you can use today, right now, in the middle of your modern chaos. These lessons are not meant to make you perfect. They are meant to make you steady. They will not remove every storm, but they will stop the storm from entering your mind. They are reminders that you don't need to control the world, you only need to control yourself. And that is why you are here. Maybe you are tired of being pulled by every headline, exhausted from every unfinished task, drained by every unkind word, or haunted by the voice in your own head telling you that you are not enough. Maybe you've been waiting for a peace like it is a finish line you will one day cross, only to realize that the race never ends. If so, you are not broken, you are human. And the Stoics knew humanity well. They knew our tendency to chase illusions, to fight reality, to seek calm in all the wrong places. And they also knew how to redirect us back to what truly matters. This is StoicCraft, a place where ancient wisdom meets modern struggle, where timeless philosophy becomes practical guidance for the world you wake up to every day. Here, we don't glorify perfection. We practice steadiness. We don't chase silence as an escape. We cultivate silence as strength. And together, we will walk through these lessons so that when life throws its noise and its storms at you, you will know exactly how to stand firm without being consumed. So take a breath. Not tomorrow, not later, right now. Because peace doesn't begin when everything is solved. It begins when you decide to seek it in this very moment. And with the Stoics as our guides, you are about to learn how. Anxiety is rarely about what is happening in front of you. It almost always comes from what your mind insists might happen next. It is a time traveler, dragging you into futures that don't yet exist. Futures filled with imagined disasters and endless what-ifs. You may sit at your desk, but your thoughts have already sprinted into tomorrow's meeting. You may lie in bed, but your heart is racing through 1,000 possible problems that might rise next week. The result is that you feel overwhelmed not by what is real, but by what is imagined. Your body begins to mirror this invisible tension. Your breath shortens, your chest tightens, your stomach knots. It feels as though you are fighting a storm. Yet when you look round, the sky is perfectly calm. The Stoics understood this long before the word anxiety was ever written in a psychology textbook. Marcus Aurelius left us 3 simple words: confine yourself to the present. It may sound limiting at first. Why would you confine yourself? But in truth, it is liberation. The present moment is the only place where clarity, strength, and even joy can be found. The future is a mist you can't touch, and the past is a shadow you can't grasp. Only this moment is solid. Only this moment is real. And yet, how often do we live anywhere but here? To be present is not a passive act. It is a rebellion. Every second of modern life demands your attention. Ads calling for your money, messages asking for your time, algorithms craving your focus. Choosing to come back to this breath, this room, this exact second, is to resist the pull of everything designed to scatter your mind. Being here is an act of courage. The truth is that presence begins not in thought, but in the body. When your mind races into a storm, the fastest way back is through your senses. Pause for just a moment. Look round. Name 3 things you can see: the shape of the window, the color of the floor, the curve of a chair. Then close your eyes. Listen. Name 3 sounds round you: the hum of a fan, a distant car, your own breathing. Finally, shift inward. What do you feel right now? The weight of your body on the chair, the temperature of the air on your skin, the tension in your shoulders. These are not gimmicks, they are anchors. They remind your nervous system where it is, not in a stormy future, but right here. Safe. This practice may seem simple, almost embarrassingly so, and yet it cuts through the grip of anxiety better than any desperate overthinking ever could. Why? Because the body cannot live anywhere but the present. When you connect your awareness to it, you call your mind back home. Each time you return, you weaken the habit of fleeing into imaginary catastrophes. You teach yourself that safety, calm, and enoughness exist here, not later. Think about how often people live on autopilot. A parent playing with their child, but secretly consumed by bills that haven't even arrived. A student sitting in class, but already lost in the fear of failing a test weeks away. A worker driving home, but replaying conversations they cannot change. None of them are actually in their lives. They are stuck in futures or pasts that do not exist. The cost is enormous. They miss the only moment they truly own. To confine yourself to the present is not to shrink your life. It is to claim it. This is why anxiety feels so heavy, because you are carrying tomorrows you were never meant to hold. Imagine how much lighter you would feel if you set them down. Imagine waking in the morning and instead of rushing to predict how everything might collapse, You simply asked, "What can I see, hear, feel right now? What is the next small action in front of me?" You would rediscover a kind of clarity that is impossible to find while juggling 1,000 imaginary futures. But presence is not about perfection. You will wander. Your mind will leap forward again and again. That is not failure. That is practice. Each time you notice and gently return, you are strengthening the muscle of awareness. You are telling yourself, "I am not lost. I can come back over time." This returning becomes easier, until it feels natural to meet life moment by moment rather than decade by decade in your head. The Stoic mind is not cold. It is awake. It doesn't deny that the future will come, nor does it deny that it may bring difficulty. But it refuses to sacrifice the only real moment, the present, on the altar of what might be. It sees clearly that no matter how loud tomorrow roars, reality speaks in whispers, and it speaks only here. That is why when your thoughts wander into imagined catastrophes, the answer is not force but invitation. Look, listen, feel, be here. That is enough. Consider how this truth applies in daily life. A professional worries about an upcoming presentation. They imagine humiliation, mistakes, rejection. Their chest tightens, sleep vanishes. But when the day arrives, they perform decently, perhaps not perfectly, but far from the disaster they rehearsed in their mind. They suffered twice, once in imagination, once in reality. The Stoics would say the first suffering was unnecessary. By returning to the present, they could have cut their suffering in half, or imagine a parent waiting for their teenager to come home late at night. Thoughts spiral, an accident, a fight, a mistake. Their mind runs wild with tragedies that may never occur. Finally, the door opens, and the child walks in safe. Once again, the storm existed only in imagination. This is what Seneca meant when he wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality. Anxiety is a thief. It steals your calm for events that may never come. When you learn to anchor yourself in the present, you reclaim what the thief has stolen. You realize that peace is not in some distant tomorrow, but in the ordinary here. This breath, this chair, this moment." And slowly, the grip of anxiety begins to loosen. So when the noise rises in your head, when your chest tightens and your breath shortens, don't chase the future. Return, not as an escape, but as a statement of strength. To be present is to remember that life is not lived in predictions or regrets. It is lived here. And here's enough. There is a quiet lie most of us carry inside. The belief that peace is something we can only feel after all the chaos has ended. We tell ourselves that once the debts are cleared, once the future is secure, once every relationship is harmonious, once our minds second, then, and only then, we will finally breathe easy. It sounds logical, but life doesn't work this way. The chaos rarely ends. The future never guarantees clarity. People remain unpredictable, and the mind, left unchecked, invents storms even when the sky is clear. If we keep waiting for calm conditions before we allow ourselves peace, we will never arrive. Stillness, in the Stoic sense, is not what comes after the battle. It is the armor you wear during it. Epictetus reminded us that man is not worried by real problems so much as by his imagined anxieties about real problems. Most of the weight we carry is not from reality itself, but from the resistance we build against it. We replay conversations that cannot be changed. We project worst-case scenarios that never come true. We argue with what is, instead of preparing for what we can do. Anxiety grows not because life is impossible, but because we refuse to meet life as it is. Think of how this plays out in modern times. A parent looks at their child and worries endlessly about the future. What if they don't succeed in school? What if they fall into the wrong crowd? What if the world is too harsh for them? None of these fears are happening in the present moment. The child may be healthy, laughing in the living room, but the parent's mind is living 20 years ahead in a storm of imagined tragedies. Or consider the worker who lies awake at night, terrified of losing their job. The pink slip has not arrived. Their performance is not under review, yet their heart races as if the disaster were already real. They are suffering not from what is happening, but from what they think should not happen. The Stoics called us back from this trap. They taught that peace is not a destination we arrive at once the world aligns with our desires. Peace is a practice we cultivate right in the middle of uncertainty. You don't wait until the morning feels calm to breathe deeply, you breathe even when it doesn't. You don't wait until your day delivers only victories to show up, you show up even when it delivers setbacks. You don't wait until your mind is free of spirals to anchor yourself, you anchor precisely when the spirals begin. Peace is not passive surrender, it is active choice. In this way, peace becomes less like a reward and more like a posture of steadiness, even when your legs are shaking, a posture of returning, again and again, to yourself instead of being pulled into every wave of chaos around you. Imagine a storm raging outside. The Stoic doesn't pretend the storm isn't real. They don't deny the thunder, the rain, the wind. But they refuse to let that storm dictate the weather inside their own mind. This is a radical shift. It means you don't need everything to be okay to be at peace. You only need to stop needing it to be okay. Life will remain unpredictable. Challenges will continue to rise. But your ability to remain centered does not have to depend on them. In fact, it becomes strongest precisely because they exist. Just as muscles are built by resistance, peace is built by meeting turmoil with steadiness. Think about the times you told yourself, once this project is over, I'll rest, or once my partner understands me, I'll feel calm, or once I earn this much money, I'll finally relax. Each time the finish line moved, each time you found that peace never arrived because the world produced a new condition, a new problem, a new demand. The illusion is that life will one day stop being difficult. The truth is that peace begins when you stop demanding that it must. This is not to say you ignore problems or refuse to act. On the contrary, Stoicism teaches us to act where we can with courage and reason. But it also teaches us to stop exhausting ourselves by trying to control what cannot be controlled, or by insisting that difficulty must disappear before we can live fully. Life will rarely align perfectly, but your perception can. Your mind can become a refuge rather than a battlefield. So the next time you feel your chest tighten with the thought, things shouldn't be this way, pause. Notice how that single judgment creates the storm. Reality is what it is. You can either argue with it endlessly or meet it with calm and strength. Choose the latter, because peace is not the gift waiting at the end of your to-do list. It is not a prize the world hands you once it's finished being difficult. Peace is the steady heart you choose to carry into difficulty itself. And here is the paradox. Once you stop demanding that life become peaceful, you finally begin to experience peace. Not because life changed, but because you did. There are days when your mind feels like an endless storm, waves of thoughts crashing one after another, refusing to give you even a moment's rest. You wake up and your head is already mid-conversation, arguing with someone who isn't there, defending yourself against accusations no one has spoken, fearing outcomes that haven't happened. By the time you step into your day, you are already exhausted not from life itself, but from the noise inside. And this noise can feel so convincing, as if every thought is urgent, every idea is true, every voice in your head deserves to be believed. But here's the simple, liberating truth. Not every thought deserves your attention. The Stoics were among the first to make this radical point. They reminded us that we are not our thoughts. Just because an idea appears in your mind does not mean it is wise, true, or worth entertaining. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The things you think about determine the quality of your mind." He didn't say you must believe every thought. He didn't say you must follow every impulse. He said the thoughts you choose to dwell on will shape you, which means choice is possible. You can step back, observe, and decide which ideas deserve space and which ones are just noise. In our modern world, this is harder than ever. We are surrounded by narratives that glorify overthinking, that romanticize anxiety as depth, that reward those who never stop analyzing. We hear phrases like, "She's so sensitive," "He's such a deep thinker," when often what we're describing is the endless spinning of a mind caught in its own trap. Social media amplifies this. One comment, one message left unread, one ambiguous silence becomes fuel for hours of mental debate. We rehearse speeches in our heads. We build cases like lawyers. We obsess over what others might be thinking. But in doing so, we hand over the wheel of our peace to chaos. Think about it this way. Your mind is like an inbox. Not every email deserves to be opened. Some are spam, some are scams, some are simply irrelevant. If you open every message, respond to every line, and let each one dictate your day, you will quickly lose control. Thoughts work the same way. Some are worth engaging, many are not. Yet most of us treat every thought as a sacred command. We forget that we have the authority to filter, to ignore, to delete. Take the common thought, "What if I fail?" It arrives suddenly, often right before a big opportunity. The moment you believe it, your body reacts as though failure is already here. Your breath shortens, your heart rate spikes, your confidence drains. But pause. Ask yourself, is this thought rooted in truth or just fear? If it is just fear, then why feed it? Acknowledge it, breathe, and let it pass like a cloud moving across the sky. You don't need to wrestle it into submission. You only need to stop giving it power. Or consider the thought, "They don't like me." It pops up after a delayed text reply, a glance you interpret as cold, a conversation that felt awkward. Suddenly you're replaying every word, analyzing every detail, convincing yourself you're disliked. But again, pause. Is this truth, or is it projection? Do you actually know what the other person thinks, or is your mind creating a story? If it's only a story, let it go. You are not obligated to live under every narrative your brain invents. This discipline is not about silencing the mind completely. It is about becoming the gatekeeper of your attention. You stand at the door of your thoughts and decide which ones enter. Fear, self-doubt, comparison, they will knock. Sometimes they will knock loudly, but you are not required to invite them in and let them sit at your table. Protect your mental energy as if it was sacred, because it is. Over time, something remarkable happens. As you stop feeding every thought, a quiet strength takes root. You are no longer yanked down by every mood swing, no longer drowning in every wave of imagination. Instead, you choose your inner weather. You realize that peace is not found by silencing all thoughts, it is found by refusing to entertain the ones that disturb your stillness without offering truth. But there is a deeper layer here, one many people avoid. Sometimes the harshest, most repetitive thoughts are not random. They are voices you have internalized, criticisms from childhood, judgments from others, standards imposed by society that echo inside long after the source is gone. These thoughts are cruel, relentless, unforgiving, and because they sound like your own voice, you accept them as truth. But the Stoics would remind you, if you speak harshly to yourself, your mind will live in war, and you deserve better than that. This is the doorway into the next lesson, learning how to speak to yourself with kindness. Because if you cannot be your own ally, no amount of external calm will last. But before we step into that, pause and notice. How do you talk to yourself when you make mistakes? Do you call yourself lazy, weak, unworthy? Or do you give yourself the same compassion you would offer a friend? The way you answer this question may be the most important factor in whether your mind becomes a home or a battlefield. The way you speak to yourself shapes the climate your soul must live in. If every morning begins with self-criticism, if every mistake is met with insults, if every fear is answered with shame, then your mind becomes a battlefield long before the world even has a chance to test you. Many of us wake up already behind in our own judgment. We call ourselves lazy for needing rest. We label ourselves weak for feeling afraid. We declare ourselves broken simply because we are not perfectly happy. And yet, if a friend confided these same struggles to us, we would never dream of speaking to them with such cruelty. Somehow, we reserve the harshest words for ourselves. This confusion comes from a mistaken belief that harshness equals discipline. We think that if we are hard enough, cold enough, sharp enough with ourselves, we will finally whip our lives into shape. But cruelty does not create calm any more than beating a frightened animal makes it gentle. You cannot shame your way into peace. You cannot insult yourself into strength. The Stoics never taught us to wage war against our own hearts. Discipline, yes, but discipline is not punishment. Discipline is structure, consistency, patience. It is the steady practice of returning to what matters, not the violent demand to be perfect. Marcus Aurelius captured this truth when he wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. That power begins not only with which thoughts you entertain, but also with how you respond to your own struggles. If every time you stumble you respond with condemnation, then your mind becomes a prison. But if you respond with patience, then even your mistakes can become a teacher. The Stoic path is not about silencing pain. It is about transforming your relationship to it. Think about how this plays out in today's world. Social media has magnified self-comparison to a level no generation before us has ever faced. You scroll through feeds filled with curated perfection, bodies sculpted by filters, careers exaggerated by captions, relationships staged for likes. Against this backdrop, every flaw in your own life feels magnified. And instead of compassion, we often meet this feeling with judgment. I'm behind. I'm not good enough. I'll never measure up. In doing so, we wound ourselves twice, once with comparison, and once with our response to it. What if, instead, you chose to meet yourself the way you would meet someone you love? Imagine waking up, and instead of calling yourself lazy for hitting snooze, you said, "I must have needed more rest." And that's okay. Imagine making a mistake at work, and instead of whispering, "I'm an idiot," you said, "I didn't get it right this time, but I can learn." Imagine feeling anxious, and instead of declaring, "I'm weak," you said, "I am human, and this moment will pass." These shifts seem small, but over time, they change everything. Epictetus once wrote, "It is not things themselves that disturb us, but our judgment about things that includes our judgment of ourselves." If your inner voice constantly mocks, pressures, and degrades you, then your judgment becomes a kind of inner tyrant. But if you practice kindness toward yourself, your judgment becomes a guide instead of a jailer. A mind that speaks gently is a mind that heals. Of course, kindness does not mean indulgence. It doesn't mean excusing every harmful habit or ignoring responsibility. True self-kindness is rooted in honesty. It allows you to admit when you've fallen short without turning that admission into self-hatred. It allows you to feel sadness without scolding yourself for being emotional. It allows you to acknowledge fear without labeling yourself as weak. In this way, kindness becomes a form of courage. Because it is easy to be cruel, it requires no vulnerability, but to look at your own brokenness and refuse to flinch. To befriend the anxious version of yourself instead of trying to exile it, that is radical strength. So pause for a moment and ask yourself, is your mind a home or a battlefield? Would you allow someone else to speak to you the way you speak to yourself? If the answer is no, then something must change. Speak less like a general barking orders at a soldier and more like a guardian guiding someone you care about. Not softer because you are giving up, but kinder because you want to live. The next time you hear that inner critic rise, notice it. Question it. Ask, is this the voice of truth, or is this just cruelty dressed as discipline? Then choose a different response. Choose language that steadies you instead of language that shatters you. Peace does not come as a prize for perfection. Peace begins with how you talk to yourself when everything is imperfect. And if you can master that tone calm, patient, steady, then you will no longer live at war with yourself. You will carry your own refuge wherever you go. There is a unique kind of suffering that doesn't come from chaos outside, but from the storm of explanation inside. You know the feeling. Someone misunderstands you, and instead of letting it be, you spend hours replaying the moment, rewriting what you should have said, constructing 1,000 possible versions of the same conversation in hopes that somehow the other person will finally see your intentions clearly. Or silence lingers after a message you sent, and suddenly you feel compelled to explain yourself again, to justify your worth, to connect dots that may never connect. This endless need to be understood feels like the path to peace, but more often, it becomes the very prison that robs you of it. The Stoics saw this tendency clearly. They understood that over-explaining is not clarity, it is control disguised as honesty. At its root, the desperate urge to explain everything comes from fear. Fear of being misread, fear of being judged, fear of being dismissed. And yet, where there is a need to control, there will always be anxiety. You don't owe the world a perfect narrative of your intentions. You don't have to preempt every judgment or soothe every discomfort. To believe you do is to chain yourself to the impossible task of managing every perception around you. Think of how much this is amplified today. In the age of social media, image is currency. We are taught to brand ourselves, to market every thought, to present every opinion with enough disclaimers so no one can misunderstand us. A single post might be followed by an entire thread of clarifications, apologies, explanations. And even then, people will interpret it however they want. The truth is, no matter how carefully you explain, you will never control how you are seen. To base your peace on universal understanding is to guarantee you will never have peace at all. Seneca offered the simple reminder, if it is not necessary, do not say it. This was not a call for suppression, but for clarity. Not every thought requires expression. Not every misunderstanding requires correction. There is great power in choosing silence over defense, in choosing stillness over mental negotiation. When you resist the urge to explain yourself endlessly, you create space for something more valuable than being understood. You create space for being free. Ask yourself, why does it matter if someone carries the wrong impression of you? Why do you feel unsettled when another person walks away without grasping your full intent? Often, it's because we tie our worth to perception. If they misunderstand me, then maybe I am not good enough. If they think poorly of me, then maybe it must be true. But this is the trap. Your truth does not need permission to exist. Your integrity does not require a unanimous vote. The Stoic path is about living according to your principles, not performing according to others' expectations. Imagine the serenity of no longer trying to win every argument, no longer trying to tie every loose end in conversation, no longer drafting explanations in your head like a lawyer preparing for trial. Imagine letting people misunderstand you and walking away unshaken. This is not indifference, it is freedom. You are not here to be universally understood. You are here to live truthfully. And truth is self-sustaining. In daily life, this means allowing silence to do its work. When someone misreads your intentions, you can choose not to chase them with clarifications. When a friend interprets your words differently than you meant, you can allow them their perspective without needing to control it. When an online stranger attacks your character, you can close the app instead of spending hours constructing the perfect defense. Each time you choose peace over performance, you grow lighter. Of course, this does not mean you never explain yourself. Honesty and communication are vital in relationships, but it does mean you question your motives before you speak. Are you clarifying because it is truly necessary? Or because your ego is desperate for approval? Are you expressing to build connection? Or are you over-explaining to control how you're seen? That difference is everything. The next time you feel the urge to defend yourself endlessly, pause. Ask, what would I lose by not explaining this? And what would I gain in return? Often the answer is surprising. You would lose nothing but anxiety, and you would gain serenity. Because peace doesn't come from winning arguments, it comes from stepping away from arguments that never needed to happen in the first place. When you make peace a higher priority than performance, you begin to feel the chains loosen. You no longer carry the exhausting burden of being universally understood. You no longer live enslaved to perception. You no longer burn hours trying to perfect the unfixable. Instead, you learn to rest in the deeper truth that your life is measured not by how well others understand you, but by how faithfully you live what you know to be right. And that shift is profound. Because once you stop over-explaining, you stop over-living in the heads of others. You return to your own center. You remember that peace is not a performance. It is a posture. And from that posture, you can walk into any misunderstanding with your spirit intact, carrying serenity that no misinterpretation can touch. One of the simplest, yet hardest truths of Stoicism is this: some things are up to us, and some things are not. Epictetus drew this line as sharply as a blade, and though we nod when we hear it, as if it is obvious, living it is another matter entirely. Because so much of our anxiety doesn't come from what happens to us, it comes from our insistence that it should not have happened. We spin endlessly on questions like, why did they treat me that way? Why isn't my life unfolding according to plan? What if something terrible happens tomorrow? And without realizing it, we become prisoners of a fight we cannot win. Because the opponent we are trying to conquer is reality itself. The wisdom here is brutally practical. You cannot control the weather. You cannot control traffic. You cannot control the moods of strangers or the choices of people you love. You cannot control the twists of fate that arrive without warning. Yet, so much of our energy is spent acting as though we can. We tighten our grip on what was never ours to hold, and then we wonder why we feel exhausted, anxious, defeated. It's because we are waging a war against inevitability. Think of how this appears in modern life. A business owner lies awake at night, endlessly rehearsing scenarios about the economy. They worry about inflation, about political shifts, about global events. And yet, not one of those forces is within their control. Or picture someone in traffic, gripping the wheel, cussing every red light, seething at every slowdown, as though rage itself could part the sea of cars. Or imagine a young adult, refreshing their phone again and again, desperate for a reply from someone they like. The silence grows heavier, but their frantic checking changes nothing. These are battles we lose the moment we choose to fight them, because the outcome was never in our hands. This doesn't mean we do nothing. Stoicism never called for apathy. It called for precision. If something is within your control, your choices, your actions, your responses, then act with courage and purpose. But if it is beyond you, release it. Not in bitterness, not in defeat, but in grace. To let go is not to give up, it is to choose freedom. It is standing before life and saying, I will carry what is mine, and I will set down what is not. Worry is not protection. It masquerades as preparation, but in truth it is a form of mental self-harm. Every time you rehearse a catastrophe that hasn't happened, you wound yourself with a blade of imagination. Every time you grip tighter to an outcome you cannot control, you strangle your own peace. To let go is to stop stabbing yourself with futures that don't exist, and yet, letting go is not easy. Every day the mind will tempt you. Check again. Control it again. Fix it again. It will whisper that if you just think harder, just anticipate more, just prepare longer, you can force life into submission. But that is the trap, and the way out begins with a simple question. Does this depend on me? If yes, then act with intention. If no, then bow to reality with grace. This single discipline has the power to transform not only your peace of mind, but your entire life. Imagine the relief of no longer trying to control how people see you, no longer exhausting yourself with what others might say, no longer burning energy over the global economy or the moods of strangers. Imagine the energy you would reclaim if you withdrew it from things that never belonged to you in the first place. You are not responsible for every storm in the world. You are responsible for your breath, for your actions, for the space between stimulus and response. And in that space, peace can take root. Think about how often anxiety comes from refusing to accept this truth. A student spirals over the results of an exam they've already taken, but the answers are written, the papers submitted. It is no longer in their control, and yet they replay it endlessly. Or someone grieves over words spoken in anger, desperately trying to reverse time, to unsay what has already been said. But the past does not bend to worry. It only yields to responsibility and repair. When you argue with what is beyond you, you lose twice. Once to reality, and once to your own imagination. To practice letting go is to live with open hands. It is to act fully where you can, and to release where you cannot. This is not weakness. It is wisdom. It is the recognition that peace is not found in controlling everything, but in refusing to be controlled by the uncontrollable. So today, pause and ask honestly, what am I gripping so tightly that does not belong to me? Is it someone else's opinion? Is it an outcome you've already done your best to influence? Is it the unpredictable future that no amount of worry will secure? Whatever it is, put it down. Not because it doesn't matter, but because carrying it destroys you. Peace of mind is not a place we stumble into by chance. It is a discipline, a daily practice, a quiet decision made again and again to stop arguing with what is beyond us. And each time you make that decision, you discover a freedom no circumstance can take away, because peace is not the absence of storms. It is the refusal to let storms outside create storms inside. And the moment you understand this, you can finally exhale, unclench, and remember, not everything is yours to hold. So much of our restlessness comes from waiting on others to give us what we refuse to give. Ourselves, we hold our breath, hoping someone will finally see us, finally approve of us, finally recognize our worth. We imagine that peace will arrive wrapped in praise, in affection, in attention. And for a moment, when those things come, we feel lighter, but almost as quickly, it slips away. Why? Because peace borrowed is not peace earned. And what is borrowed can always be taken back. Consider how often we outsource our calm. We wait for a partner to reassure us before we can feel secure. We wait for a boss to recognize us before we can feel competent. We wait for likes and comments before we can feel visible. And in doing so, we give away the keys to our own serenity. The result is that every silence feels like rejection, every delay feels like abandonment, every overlooked effort feels like proof that we don't matter. We build our inner stability on ground that shifts with every opinion. The Stoics warned against this trap. They taught that true peace begins when you stop outsourcing your worth. You are not unlovable because someone turned away. You are not invisible because someone didn't notice. You are not lost just because someone else hasn't found you. These are illusions born of dependency. The reality is simpler, though harder to accept. If you cannot give yourself the respect, safety, and understanding you crave, no one else's gift of it will ever be enough. Modern life intensifies this dependency. Social media has conditioned us to measure our value in metrics: followers, views, hearts, shares. A single post can determine someone's mood for the entire day. If it performs well, they feel worthy. If it performs poorly, they feel invisible. It is the perfect machine for keeping peace perpetually out of reach, because worth built on numbers can collapse with every algorithm change. What looks like recognition is actually a leash, but imagine the opposite. Imagine not needing to be chosen in order to feel valuable. Imagine waking up and not checking your phone for proof of existence. Imagine walking into a room without scanning for approval. The mind becomes quieter, lighter, freer. When your sense of worth rises from within, it no longer trembles at the silence of others. This does not mean isolation. It does not mean becoming cold or detached. It means becoming solid. It means recognizing that the affection of others is beautiful, but not oxygen. It is a gift, not a requirement. And when you stand on this ground, relationships transform. You no longer demand that others fill your emptiness. You no longer suffocate them with the weight of being your sole source of peace. Instead, you meet them as whole to whole. Not have to have dot, so how do you begin? By noticing the moments when you wait. When you wait for someone to say the right words before you allow yourself to rest. When you wait for someone's approval before you let yourself feel proud. When you wait for someone's affection before you believe you are worthy of love. In those pauses, ask yourself, what am I refusing to give myself right now? If I want comfort, why can't I offer it? If I want validation, why can't I honor my own effort? If I want love, why can't I treat myself with it first? These are not easy shifts. They require practice, repetition, patience. But each time you turn inward instead of outward, you strengthen a foundation that no one can shake. The Stoics would remind us that what is within our control is always enough, and our ability to offer ourselves kindness, respect, and approval is always within our control. Think of the freedom that comes with this. The next time someone ignores your message, instead of spiraling into self-doubt, you remind yourself, their silence does not diminish my worth. The next time recognition doesn't arrive, you remind yourself, my effort speaks for itself. The next time you long for affection, you remind yourself, love begins with how I treat me. This is not arrogance, it is sanity. Because in the end, no one can give you what you refuse to give yourself. You can spend your life begging for scraps of approval, or you can cultivate a well within that no one can empty. One path leaves you hostage to the moods of others. The other makes you unshakable. And the choice, as always, is yours. We often whisper to ourselves in moments of exhaustion. From now on, I just want peace. We say it after an argument, after a long day, after another night of tossing and turning. We promise that tomorrow will be different, and then tomorrow arrives, and nothing changes. Why? Because peace is not something you wish for, it is something you train for. Without structure, intention remains fragile. Without habits, desire fades. The Stoics knew this long before psychology gave it a name. They understood that calm is not luck, but practice. In modern life, this practice feels almost impossible. We live in a culture of instant answers. A question rises, and within seconds we can type it into a search bar, scroll through explanations, drown in endless analysis. We have trained ourselves to believe that discomfort must be solved immediately, that silence is wasted time. And yet, This constant search only deepens the noise. Not every ache in your chest needs an explanation. Not every fear in your mind needs a backstory. Sometimes what your spirit longs for is not more data, but rest. Think of the difference between awareness and overanalysis. Awareness is noticing the tightness in your chest, the clenching in your jaw, the restless loop in your head. Overanalysis is interrogating it, naming every possible cause, inventing every possible outcome. Awareness grounds you, overanalysis drowns you. Seneca reminded us that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Overthinking is often nothing more than self-harm dressed as self-help. Consider how this shows up in daily life. A friend doesn't reply to your message. Awareness says, "I notice my mind is restless." Overanalysis says, "They must be angry. Maybe I offended them. Maybe they don't value me. Maybe this relationship is falling apart." Hours are spent in imaginary conversations, and yet nothing changes in reality. Or think of the employee who notices their boss looks serious in a meeting. Awareness says, "My mind is creating stories." Overanalysis spins, "Am I in trouble? Did I make a mistake? Am I about to be fired?" By the end of the day, they are exhausted from battles that never existed. Silence interrupts this spiral. To sit in stillness for even 5 minutes is to declare, "I do not need to solve everything right now." It is to let the questions come without giving them your energy. It is to notice the noise without becoming it. And from this quiet, clarity often rises on its own. Answers reveal themselves not through force but through patience. But the practice is difficult because silence does not scream the way fear does. Fear is loud, demanding, urgent. Silence whispers, it waits. It asks you to do the hardest thing of all in a culture that glorifies action, to pause, to observe, to choose non-reaction. And yet, that pause can be life-changing. In that sacred stillness, you stop being a victim of your thoughts and start becoming a custodian of your inner world. Imagine ending your day not with a frantic scroll, not with background noise, but with 5 minutes of simply sitting in quiet. At first, your mind will resist. It will scream for a distraction. It will throw thoughts like stones at the stillness. But if you remain, if you breathe and let them pass, you will begin to feel the subtle relief of not chasing every shadow. You will begin to understand that silence is not empty, it is full of the strength you've been missing. And here lies the deeper truth. The mind does not crave constant answers. It craves rest. It does not need every mystery solved. It needs you to stop running from stillness. The Stoics knew this, which is why they practiced moments of reflection without demand, moments of quiet without conclusion. They weren't avoiding life. They were preparing for it by tending the space within dots so the next time you catch yourself spiraling into why. What if? What does it mean? Pause, sit in silence. Let the questions float without answering them. Choose to stop feeding the fire, because peace is not something you earn by figuring it all out. Peace is something you choose, even while the questions remain. Most of us live as if peace were waiting at the end of a long road. We tell ourselves, once this problem is solved, once these people change, once life finally calms down, then I'll allow myself to rest. It feels comforting to believe that serenity is out there, waiting for us after the storm passes. But what if this belief is exactly why peace feels so far away? What if peace was never meant to be a prize handed to you by circumstance, but a choice you could make in the middle of chaos? The Stoics remind us of this truth again and again. We do not control the world outside us, but we do control how we meet it. To wait for calm conditions before you calm your mind is to surrender your freedom. Every day brings uncertainty, news that unsettles you, conversations that sting, expectations that fall apart. If your serenity depends on these things aligning perfectly, you will spend your life chasing a horizon that always moves further away. But the moment you realize peace can be chosen here and now, You take back your power. Think of how this plays out in the small moments. Anger knocks on your door, someone cuts you off in traffic. Someone interrupts you in a meeting. You feel the familiar surge rising in your chest. In that instant, you can surrender to it, or you can breathe and answer with calm. That calm is not weakness. It is strength in its purest form, a conscious act of resistance. Or consider worry, the whisper that everything might go wrong, that tomorrow will collapse, that you are not prepared. You can feed it until it grows into panic, or you can pause and remind yourself, this thought does not deserve my energy. That choice is peace in action. Every quiet response becomes a victory that no circumstance can take from you. Each time you refuse to let the storm outside create a storm inside, you exercise a muscle that grows stronger with use. Peace stops being fragile, something that disappears with every setback. It becomes resilient, something you carry with you no matter what arrives. The temptation, of course, is to believe that peace belongs only to those who have escaped hardship, those living in quiet houses, in stable relationships, with plenty of money and time. But you know this is not true. Peace does not belong to the untouched. It belongs to the trained. It belongs to those who choose it deliberately. Even when life is messy, a billionaire can be tormented by restlessness, while a man with little can sit steady in the midst of struggle. The difference is not fortune, it is perspective. Marcus Aurelius began his mornings with reflection, preparing himself for the difficulties ahead. He would remind himself that he would meet people who were ungrateful, arrogant, deceitful, and by doing so, he lessened their power to disturb him. At night, he would review his day, not to scold himself, but to notice, to learn, to realign. Seneca taught that we suffer more in imagination than in reality, and that discipline of daily reflection was his way of cutting through illusion. These routines were not glamorous. They were simple, repetitive, ordinary, yet they forged resilience that could not be broken by fortune or fate. Now look at how we begin our mornings today. For many of us, the first act of waking is reaching for the phone. In an instant, the mind is flooded with other people's demands, with headlines designed to provoke, with images designed to compare. Before our feet even touch the floor, our inner calm has already been hijacked. And yet we wonder why we feel restless, scattered, overwhelmed. The truth is uncomfortable but liberating. Your routines shape your reality more than your intentions ever will. Think of the contrast. One person begins the day with silence, with a breath, with a moment of grounding. They sit, if only for 2 minutes, and ask, what would a wise person do today? Another person begins the day by diving headfirst into emails, scrolling through messages, reacting to whatever appears on the screen. By noon, one carries steadiness, the other carries stress. The difference is not luck, it is rhythm. Evenings matter just as much. How many of us end the day by numbing ourselves with endless scrolling, with background noise, with a desperate attempt to escape the restlessness of our own thoughts? We avoid silence because silence feels heavy. But what if we reclaimed it? What if, before closing our eyes, we breathed, reflected, and gently asked ourselves, where did I act wisely today? Where did I falter? And what can I try differently tomorrow? Not as judgment, but as guidance. These are the quiet rituals that slowly rewire a mind prone to chaos. The Stoics practiced what they called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of adversity. They would visualize challenges before they came, not to wallow in pessimism, but to train resilience. By imagining difficulty, they lessened its shock. By rehearsing calm, they made calm more accessible when storms arrived. In modern terms, it was mental conditioning. Today, we prepare for marathons with running schedules, for performances with rehearsals, for exams with study guides. But how many of us prepare for life itself? The Stoics did, and that is why their calm was not fragile, it was forged. The beautiful thing about routine is that it doesn't have to be grand. You don't need to overhaul your life in a single sweep. You don't need to build hours of meditation or perfect journaling habits overnight. Start small. Sit in stillness for 2 minutes each morning. Take one deep, conscious breath before answering an email. Write down one lesson you noticed before bed. These are not meaningless gestures. They are medicine. Repeated daily, they become grooves in the mind, pathways that guide you back to steadiness again and again. Think of how athletes train. They don't perform their best on the day of competition by accident. They perform because they have built habits that shape their bodies and minds long before the spotlight arrives. Peace works the same way. You cannot expect calm to appear magically in the middle of a crisis if you have never practiced it in the quiet moments. It must be built into the rhythm of your days. And here is the liberating truth. You don't have to wait for your circumstances to improve before you feel steady. You can begin now, with the simplest of habits. Wake and breathe before you scroll. Reflect before you sleep. Ask yourself in the morning, what would wisdom look like today? Ask yourself at night, what did I learn? In these quiet bookends, life slowly transforms. Anxiety may not disappear overnight, but over time, its grip weakens, because peace is not a miracle. It is a muscle, and your routine is the training ground. So pause and ask, what small ritual can you begin today that protects your calm? Not tomorrow, not when life slows down, but today. Choose one and repeat it. Let repetition carve stability into your days. In time, you will see that your routine has given you something far greater than temporary relief. It will give you a steady foundation, a rhythm of living that no storm can shake. From the time we are children, we are taught to chase answers. Every problem must be solved. Every question must be explained. Every uncertainty must be filled with explanation. And so, when something feels wrong inside us, when anxiety hums like static beneath the surface, when worry loops endlessly, we instinctively reach for more thoughts, more analysis, more stories to patch the silence. We replay events, we dissect conversations, we dig endlessly for reasons. It feels productive, as though the more we think, the closer we will come to peace. But the irony is painful. Often the harder we chase answers, the further peace slips away. What if peace doesn't live in the answer at all? What if peace begins where thinking ends? The Stoics understood this paradox. They knew that not every disturbance needed resolution, not every question demanded a reply. Sometimes the wisest thing we can do is simply sit with the noise in our head, to let it pass like wind through leaves, instead of turning every rustle into a puzzle to solve. Silence, in this sense, is not absence, it is presence. It is the space where thoughts are allowed to pass through without taking root. And in that space, something rare happens. The mind stops fighting itself. The body softens. The soul, long drowned in mental clutter, begins to breathe again. This is not the silence of suppression, it is the silence of stillness. This is why the Stoics did not retreat from life. They governed empires, faced exile, endured slavery, navigated betrayal. They lived fully in the world, yet they refused to let the world dictate the climate of their minds. Marcus Aurelius dealt with wars, plagues, and political chaos, and yet he returned to his journal each night to remind himself that peace was his to choose. Epictetus lived in chains, yet he insisted that his freedom was untouched because it resided in his response. These were not men spared from hardship, they were men who chose calm within it. You can do the same. The next time life interrupts your plans, test this truth. You're stuck in traffic, minutes ticking by. You can curse, tense, rage, or you can breathe, surrender, and use the time to reflect. You lose a deal, a job, a relationship. You can spiral into bitterness, or you can remind yourself that your worth was never tied to outcomes. You are misunderstood, judged, ignored. You can scramble to explain yourself, or you can stand steady in your truth, knowing peace is not given or taken by perception. Each of these moments is an invitation to choose, and here's the beauty. Every time you choose peace in difficulty, it grows stronger. Like a muscle lifting weight. The harder the weight, the greater the growth. Soon, ordinary frustrations that once shook you will feel small. The argument that once ruined your week becomes a test of patience. The silence that once haunted you becomes a lesson in self-sufficiency. The delays, the disappointments, the unpredictability, they stop being thieves of your calm. They become training grounds. So do not postpone your calm until life becomes easier. Do not wait for the day when everything falls into place. That day will never come, but this moment is already here. And in this moment, you can choose. Unclench your fist. Release the thought that no longer serves you. Refuse to let your mood be dictated by fears of what may never arrive. Choose peace not because everything is fine, but because you are free to meet everything with calm. The Stoics teach us that serenity is not the absence of noise. It is the way you stand in the middle of noise. It is not the removal of storms. It is the refusal to let storms enter your soul. It is not something fragile, waiting for perfect conditions. It is a decision, made again and again, until it becomes the steady rhythm of your life, and perhaps the deepest truth of all. Peace is not waiting for you in some distant future. It is waiting for you the moment you decide it belongs to you. We've walked through this entire journey together, tracing 10 lessons from Stoic philosophy that show us how peace of mind is not something the world gives, but something we cultivate. We began by learning to anchor ourselves in the present, realizing that anxiety is often a time traveler dragging us into futures that do not exist. We confronted the lie that everything must be okay before we can feel peace, and we discovered that calm is armor we wear during the storm, not after it. We explored the truth that not every thought deserves our attention, that some voices in our heads are nothing but noise, and that our inner weather is chosen by which thoughts we entertain. We turned inward to the way we speak to ourselves, remembering that harshness does not create discipline, only despair, and that gentleness with our own struggles is radical strength. We examined the exhausting habit of over-explaining, realizing that peace does not come from managing every perception, but from allowing ourselves the freedom to be misunderstood. We faced the hardest truth of all, that so much of our suffering comes from clinging to what we cannot control, and that freedom begins the moment we let go. We looked at the trap of waiting on others to give us what we refuse to give ourselves, learning that worth and serenity cannot be outsourced. We saw the power of routine, that peace is not a wish, but a muscle built in daily rituals, and that habits shape reality more than intentions ever will. We embraced silence as medicine, remembering that peace is not always found in answers, but in stillness. And finally, we realized that peace is not a reward at the finish line of a perfect life, but a decision we can make right now, in the middle of imperfection, taken together. These are not abstract ideas. They are practices. They are choices you can make today, in ordinary moments. When the phone doesn't buzz with the reply you hoped for, when traffic locks you in place, when a conversation goes sideways, when your chest tightens with invisible fears. Each of these moments is an invitation to apply what the Stoics taught, not by escaping life, but by engaging with it differently, by meeting it with clarity, steadiness, and grace. And here is the challenge, the one most people avoid. It is easy to nod at these truths, to agree with them, to say, yes, that makes sense. It is much harder to live them, to pause in the heat of anger and choose calm, to meet silence with trust instead of panic, to respond to your own mistakes with patience instead of punishment, to choose not to explain yourself when everything in you wants to defend. These are not wartime decisions. They are daily disciplines. They are quiet rebellions against the chaos of a world that profits from your anxiety. The modern world thrives on your unrest. Corporations design apps to steal your attention. News cycles spin fear into profit. Social media algorithms amplify outrage, comparison, and endless hunger for validation. If you let the world train your mind, you will never know peace. But if you train your mind, if you practice these Stoic lessons, you reclaim your freedom. You take back control of the only thing that was ever yours, your response. So ask yourself now, which of these lessons speaks to you most? Is it the need to return to the present? Is it the courage to let go of control? Is it the practice of speaking kindly to yourself? Is it the discipline of silence? Whichever it is, choose one. Practice it today, not tomorrow, not someday, but today. Because peace is not waiting on the horizon. It is waiting in this very breath. And here's the deeper invitation. Don't walk this path alone. The Stoics never wrote for themselves. They wrote for others, for communities, for future generations. Your story matters. The way you've wrestled with anxiety, the practices that help you, the insights you found in your own struggles, they may be exactly what someone else needs to hear. Share them, not only for your sake, but for the sake of the next person who feels trapped in their own noise and is desperate for a way out. This is what StoicCraft is here for. A place where ancient wisdom meets modern struggle. A place where philosophy becomes practice, where reflection becomes resilience. If this journey resonated with you, I invite you to stay with us. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next lesson. Share this video with someone who might need it. And most of all, join the conversation in the comments. Your words could be the lifeline someone else is waiting for. Remember, peace is not found later. It is chosen now, not because life is easy, but because you are free. Free to decide that storms outside will not become storms inside. Free to refuse to be controlled by what you cannot control. Free to build a home within your mind instead of a battlefield. That freedom begins the moment you choose it. So as you close this video and step back into your life, carry this with you. Peace is not something you hope for. It is something you practice. And every practice begins with a single decision. Make it now. Choose calm, choose clarity, choose strength, choose peace,